Perfect. We are all set up to start printing our swatch. And before we head to that, we have to do very important parts, which are first clean our printer. So please make sure that you are going to clean your print bed. This is the print bed, the part on which you are going to print on top of it. Please always clean your print bed before you start printing. It's important that you clean it, because if you have some residual particles on the print bed, then your files might not stick to the plate as you wish it could. Also, touching, you shouldn't be touching the way I am touching. You shouldn't be doing this because our fingers have a little bit of residual oils on the tips, and this also can affect if the prints are going to stick on the surface or not. As usual, you can remove the plater. I'm using the textured plater that is a little bit more, is better to print on with the flexible filaments because they don't stick so much. They stick, but just enough to be removed. If you're using a smooth plate, then you can do that, but it's going to take you a little bit more time to take the prints off. Just be careful and go slow if you are using a smooth plate that doesn't have a texture. Using a smooth plate is not an issue, even though don't say that in the 3D printing community. I suggest that because, as you will see, all of the flexible filaments always take the surface, takes the properties of the surface that they are printed on. What does it mean? Well, it means that if you're printing on the structured TP and on the structured plates, then you will have structure on the side that it's being laid down on the plate. If you have a smooth plate, then you will create it will create a very smooth surface. And sometimes you want that. Sometimes when you are, for example, printing 3D printed satin, then you want it to be extremely smooth. So you want to use a surface that also is very smooth. When putting down your plater, just make sure that you are being careful, because most of these platers have, most of these beds are magnetic. So it takes a little bit of cautious, so you don't chip your fingers or your nails. It could hurt you and it's not very pleasant. I'm cleaning my bed with paper towels and IPA, which stands for isopropyl alcohol. Make sure that you are always using only isopropyl alcohol and nothing else. Or you can use water with a very small amount of dish soap, so you can use a diluted form of dish soap, but the best thing that you can do is to use the IPA, and it will clean the surface the best. Perfect. Now that we have our bed cleaned, we have to help our printer to get ready. So what I like to do is that I like to preheat my printer. The reason why I like to do it is as if you're imagining that you are about to do a big exercise and you start doing the exercise without warming up your body. So the printers, even though they're not humans, they might work the same way. So if we preheat the printer, then we are warming up the machine so it works better. So on your machine, you should be able to preheat your printer. So I'm going to preheat my nozzle to 230, and then I'm going to heat my bed to 250. Sorry, not 200, but just 50. And then I'm going to check one thing, and that's my nozzle. It's very important. The nozzle is the part that prints out the filament. So if your nozzle is not clean, then you're going to have issues with printing out your filament. So if you have a steel brush, and always brush your nozzle with the steel brush. I don't have to use the steel brush on the bamboo because they have the little brush in the back in there. And this printer is absolutely wonderful because she does everything for us, from the calibration, just the preheating that needs to be done. If you are using an older printer, for example, a Prusa printer MK3S or any of the older printers, then just make sure to always clean your nozzle. Let's prepare our filaments. I already unpacked my filament, and what I'm going to do is that to make sure that the filament can be grabbed well, I'm going to cut the tip of the filament so it's pointy. So I'm going to cut it. And since it's flexible filament, you can use just normal scissors to cut the point. Then I'm going to load my filament. I'm going to push it through the tube. Your printer might have a different style of loading. I have to push it through the tube until it reaches the top of the extruder. The extruder is this part, which is the entire part that is responsible for printing from heating to distributing our filament, and it moves above the bed. And now that I have that, I'm going to click on filament and I'm going to say that I wanted to load the filament. If you are using a filament without the spool, it's better to leave the filament hanging on the table free so it doesn't tangle when it's being grabbed. The 3D printer is asking me if I can see the filament being extruded, and as it is, I'm going to click that it is pushing the filament out correctly, and I'm going to let the printer print out the filament until I see that it has the color. Purge out the filament. Purging is the process when we are just trying to push the residual filament that was prior in the 3D printer and switching it to a different color. This process is not the most sustainable one. It's a good practice if you want to exchange one filament from another. Sometimes I don't even do the pushing out of the filament just because I usually don't mind having like the monochromatic print. What is amazing about the Bamboo AI Mini is that it does everything for you. So it did the purging itself. It cuts the filament itself, so it just throws the filament away. It has a cutter here, so it moves very quickly, and then it cuts the filament that doesn't need to be on the nozzle, and then it also cleans the nozzle before it starts printing, which your 3D printer maybe doesn't do. So what you need to do is to cut out the filament when it's purged, and clean the nozzle again. Now, if I was on a different printer, what you would need to do is to make the first layer calibration. We're looking to have a very nice line. So the line is nice, thick. It shouldn't be squished. It shouldn't look like it's a thin piece of paper. It should look like a very nice rounded piece of toothpaste. I'll add also a picture so you know what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the toothpaste. So if your printer needs the first layer calibration, then you please do the first layer calibration. If you have a printer that does the auto calibration, then what you can do is head to printing your file. So either you're going to use the SD cards that I have here. I have the SD card mini on my printer, and you're going to load the files in there, or you're going to send the print, as I'm gonna do, directly from your computer or your phone. So I'm gonna click on the Bamboo Studio, and I am going to say that I want to send the file to my printer. I'm gonna click on bed leveling because I want it to make the calibration of the first layer. And then I'm gonna say that I don't want the printer to check the flow of the filament itself. Since we have adjusted the settings, it would be a nonsense to let the printer do it herself. Sometimes they do it better, sometimes they don't. Well, it's up to you if you want to depend on machines or if you want to depend on your knowledge. I know I'm joking. What I mean is that if we adjusted the flow, then we can print our sample and see how it works. Because if we let the printer calibrate itself, then it might be our good settings, but it might also not, and then we don't know if we've made the settings well or if they were incorrect. So I'm going to send it, and in the second I should be seeing the printer printing. So the printer is doing the bed leveling. It's gonna do it very slowly since I said that it's supposed to do slowly. So we can see that the nozzle is being cleaned, but there is still a bit of unnecessary filament that's being pushed, and we have to wait a little bit and it will start printing in a second. Now it's doing the bed leveling, trying to see what's the surface, so it prints correctly on top of the surface. Even if the surface is a little bit crooked, then you still should have a straight print. I'm gonna take away this piece, and now we are going to wait. Oh, it should take 5 minutes. The first thing that a 3D printer does is it prints out a piece of line just to clean the nozzle and also to show you how will the line work. And I'm gonna just lower it for you so you see it better. We are starting with printing the walls, and even though the Bamboo is quite quick printer, since we set it up, the printer to be a little bit slower, it's printing very slow. And I can see that my printer is popping. It might be that I left the filament outside, so it has some humidity, that absorbed some humidity. Or I might try to lower the temperature. So I'm going to go to controls. I'm gonna click on the nozzle and I'm gonna lower the temperature and see if that works. So I got lower with the temperature by 5 degrees and the popping stopped. So the temperature was too high for the filament and the filament was boiling. That's why we could hear the pops. Let me see if I can show it to you a little bit closer. Yes, like this. This is the process of printing the first layer. The first layer is the slowest one, but also the thickest one. What I'm also going to do, what I forgot to tell you, is that I'm going to disable the fan because I don't think that we need it now in our steps. We are printing quite slow and we hit the correct temperature, so there is no need to be using the fan to cool down the filament so it sticks. So the fan is used in there to cool down the filament so it sticks better to one layer to another, but we don't need to do that since you can see that it's printing very well. I cannot see many hairy or a lot of hairs or any oozing, which are the strings. It's really printing a nice piece of fabric. It should be done in a less than 1 minute. We are heading to the end and this is our result. As I said to you, that here we have a string, and this is exactly what the printer does when it stretches the filament too much. Sorry for the sounds, like it's hilarious. You can disable it on the Bamboo printer, but I just love it. It's just so nice to have some encouragement when that print is done. Okay, so I'm gonna take it off. Here I have one hair here and the second one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna cut it. The pieces that you usually have to cut are the pieces where the 3D printer started and the pieces where the 3D printer ended. It's quite easy to take this off, and now we have this beautiful mesh. I'll show you the mesh in the details in a second, but before we do that, I want to make sure that you know what to do with the printer if you are no longer printing. So what you need to do with the printer if you are no longer printing is to clean the bed again. So we are going to clean the bed. We are going to unload the filament. You shouldn't leave the filament inside of your printer because as it cools down it can get stuck, so it's better to always take it out and store it in the box with the silica gel package so it doesn't get so humid.